Hey, I'm very excited. So Rachel, I'll let Rachel do the proper introduction of herself because I would never do it justice, but I have known Rachel. We met in a business cohort in September, I guess, somewhere around there.
Yeah,
And
September.
yeah, and so we spent 8 weeks or so meeting every week for 2 hours going through an intensive business program, and I loved her energy and enthusiasm. And it was actually, I didn't even think to ask Rachel until I saw an Instagram post that she did, which was just fluke. And I was like, what am I doing? I should invite Rachel in to talk about branding. So that was an example, or this is an example of Instagram actually leading to something, making connections, real life connections. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, amazing. Well, thank you for having me. I've been super excited to come and meet all of you and chat about branding. This is a topic that I feel scares a lot of people, but I just so happen to nerd out over it. So I think what we're going to do is have a lot of fun today. I know that with workshops, there could be a lot of information, and I do have a presentation that I have prepared just to share some foundations. I really want to keep it simple today. The main goal is to sort of cover the basics, make sure you guys have a good understanding of what does it really mean to have a personal brand. And what I hope for is that we'll have a lot of time for discussion. I hope for this to be an interactive experience. So throughout the workshop, I'm going to pull up some slides. We might have a few points of discussion. I'll ask some questions. And in the case that you guys want to have your input, I'm not sure in terms of etiquette how you guys like to navigate the Zoom room, but if you feel comfortable, you can drop your answers in the chat, or I guess raise your digital hand, and then we can talk. So what I'll do is I'll share my screen so that everyone is looking at the same thing. I find that I'm a visual person. So whenever I'm just looking at people, like I get sort of lost. Let me know if you could see my screen. Give me a thumbs up if it's good. All right, awesome. So let me orient myself here so I can see all of you. Um, Okay, perfect. So what we're going to be talking about today is personal branding. Before we dive in, I figured I should introduce myself. That's something that we all should start with. And I'm not going to bore you with like a bio about all of the credentials I have. If you want to check out my resume, go visit my LinkedIn profile. What I wanted to start with is to share a little bit about my story, because I feel like when you share about your journey of how you got here, people really connect with that and understand that. So, who am I? I like to introduce myself as the art kid that learned how to do business. I'm a creative through and through. I was the kid who dreamed about just making things for a living. I always had my head stuck in a book. I was a big bookworm and I loved making stories. And growing up, I really wanted to make things that made people smile. I feel like you guys would understand that. You create stories, you create characters, and you want to invite people into that story. That's sort of what I do, but in a visual sense. Words are not as much my thing. I speak with visuals. My dream job growing up was I just wanted to be a graphic designer, work in a marketing company, work there for 40 years and then retire. I thought that working at a creative job would make me happy. So it turns out I wasn't. I realized that a lot of the way that our system is created is that we're often stuffed into these boxes. You have to show up a certain way in order to get the job. You need to show up a certain way on social media in order to be liked and accepted. You need to make everyone happy by doing what they expect you to do so that you can move up and advance in the world. And I climbed that ladder and I realized I wasn't happy. So I thought, well, you know what? I'm just going to go out and create my own opportunities then. So I quit my job, started up my own business, thinking that doing my own thing would give me the freedom to present myself the way that I wanted to express freely, and to create my own opportunities in a way that fit me. Little did I know that the pressures to show up the same way, to be liked by people, also existed in the world of business. Surprise, surprise. The first thing that I noticed was everybody showed up a certain way. If you look online, you're going to notice wow, everyone's branding looks the same. It's clean, it's corporate, it's black and white. You got that cool cursive font, the same Canva templates. You need to dress a certain way, talk a certain way in order to be considered professional. And it's the same thing all over again. And I experienced this going into the world of business, and I struggled a lot with it. And of course, me being the newbie in business, I thought, okay, well, I'm just going to have to play this game and do it better than everyone else. So branded myself as like this big branding agency, tried to look bigger than I actually am, presented myself in a way that felt very inauthentic to me, you know, dressed up a certain way, made certain types of social posts that I wasn't excited about, but I thought everyone else would be interested in, and totally compromised my own sense of character. And come a few years down the line, I helped a lot of people, but I didn't feel good about the way that I showed up. I was hiding behind my own logos and graphics. I felt like people didn't see me, and I didn't have that connection that I really actually wanted with my audience. And I wanted to be seen, but something wasn't coming through. So what ended up happening is a few years down the line, I ended up making the brave decision to cut the crap with my business brand and start showing my own face online. I just want to get a quick show of hands to sort of see if any of you have felt nervous around showing your face on the internet, or just like letting people see you. Okay, yeah, it's not just me. I feel like this is something that's really common, and it sounds simple, but it's really challenging. And that was one of the very interesting things that I learned when it comes to having a personal brand. It's much less about looking pretty and having followers and having cool graphics. It's more about really understanding what your character is and stepping into that comfortably and being able to communicate that in an online space. So I think a lot of the most recent like year and a half or so has been me transitioning into my personal brand, defining what my character is, and continually stepping into that every day. And I mean, I'm speaking on this, so obviously I've come a certain distance, but as a point of encouragement for you guys, it's something that's ever evolving. I'm still figuring out my brand, even if it looks like maybe I have some things figured out, but it's something that is always evolving. So it's okay that you don't feel like you have everything put together. It might look like a certain way on the outside, but on the inside, you're always testing something. You're always trying to push those boundaries a little further. So just a point of encouragement for you guys. And yeah, that's sort of what I do today. So what I do today is, yes, I do help people with the visual side of how they present themselves. I have a design background, and visuals is how I speak. But a lot of what I really enjoy doing is having intentional conversations with people about who are you and how do you really want the world to see you. And then there's the strategy side of things of how you present that to the world. So most of what I'm going to be talking about today is the identity side of helping you guys figure out and just start asking yourselves the right questions that will help you find the clarity of what your brand is going to be. So that's basically who I am. And for those of you who wonder, I know I look like I'm 16. I'm 28 years old. The way that I present myself is very intentionally. I want people to treat me as if I'm a lot older than I am. I feel like we all have this complex where people look at you a certain way and they make certain assumptions. So just to clear that up, this is sort of the way that I am. All right, let's move on to the first thing that I wanted to talk about. And this one is more of a question for you guys. What does it mean to have a personal brand? And I wanted to sort of put that out as a question to you guys, and maybe I might get a few of you to raise your hand and share about what are your initial thoughts. What do you think it means to have a personal brand? What does that mean to you? So if you guys have thoughts, I guess raise your digital hand, raise your physical hand, and then you can unmute yourself and share. So let me make sure I could see
I just have
everyone here.
one quick question. Have you moved on the
Yeah.
slides, or are you still on the first slide? Because all we're seeing
Oh,
is the personal branding workshop, slide number 1.
oh, hang on. Let me
We're
see.
seeing your PDF. There. Okay, that's what I thought.
Okay, is it working?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Perfect. Thanks for catching that. Okay, I think Tammy, you have your hand up.
Well, basically, what I think of as a personal brand is when somebody can look at something and automatically know that that's what they're seeing. Like we all know the Golden Arches is McDonald's without having to see the word McDonald's,
Mm,
and things of that nature.
yeah, absolutely. It's about having something that people recognize that stands out and is distinctive. Thank you for that. Anyone else have any thoughts? Erin.
I've uh I've been told that your personal brand is how people remember you. And that really clicked with me because I was a waitress for like 10 or 15 years, and the person I was when I was a waitress was not the me that I was at home. And so I had my own persona as a waitress, and that's what I think of whenever I think of personal brand.
I really like that. It's like a character that people knew you as, but that's not everything. That's not the whole picture. I like that. Awesome. Anyone else have any thoughts to share? Leia or Ellie, which one do you prefer me to address you by?
Either one is fine. I'm not sure if I can articulate this correctly, but I think it's kind of like when I go to someone's webpage or their Instagram, it's sort of like the essence I get of them. Like I can look at their graphics, the things they're posting, and I sort of feel like I know their values and sort of like what they're trying to express, whatever their art is, whatever their thing is. I look at the imagery and their colors and things and just sort of get an idea of like what their personality is. Like it's more of a personal thing and less about the art and more like who is this person.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about finding a creative way to communicate about who you are using all of this complicated thing called the internet to help people feel you through the screen. That's actually very well articulated, and that's something we're going to be diving into further today. Any other thoughts before I move on? Sarah?
So for me, looking at it from the other side as well, a personal brand is something that I can use for myself so that I don't have to recreate things every single time. If I have like a template to work from, then it's going to be easier to make things to show the world um, so that I'm staying on point and not have to think about it every single time.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's about creating your own template in a sense, so you don't have to be reinventing the wheel every single time. One of the really common things that I hear a lot is when you don't really have the foundation set for your brand, every time you make a social post, it takes so much time and energy to figure out what are my colors? Is this font right? Does my messaging connect? Do people even get me? It feels like a lot of work just to have very little to no feedback coming back because every time you show up, it's a little different. So, yeah, it's about creating a foundation that you custom make for yourself. But every once you have that set, time and time again, you can just fall back to it. Because for me, I'm like, my brand color is pink. It requires very little headspace once you figure out what works for you. So, that's a really good point. Thank you for sharing that. Any other thoughts? All right. All right. Well, you guys brought up some really, really good points here. And I feel like maybe I didn't even need this next slide, but just to answer the questions, having a personal brand is all about building a character or persona that people recognize you as. And this character is something that you have full control over. I think a common thing that comes up is that people are so close to themselves that they worry, oh, if I have a personal brand, does that mean that I have to share everything? Like, what if there's things that I'm not comfortable with people seeing? And that is a very valid concern. And just to put your fears at ease, you do have control over what you do or don't share. And I will also have these slides shared with you after the presentation. So in the case you guys can't write fast enough, totally cool. I'll make sure that you guys get the PDF for this afterwards. But yeah, it's about building a character, and it's basically being more intentional in the way that you present yourself. One really common misconception that people have is that having a personal brand or that sorry, let me backtrack. One common misconception is that only certain people need a personal brand, people who are influencers, who have millions of followers. But the reality is every human being on this planet has a personal brand, because whether you like it or not, people see you a certain way. You represent yourself in no matter what you do. Even the person working as a cashier at McDonald's, they also have a brand. It's what people know you and recognize you for. And what building a personal brand is just about being more intentional in the choices that you make, so that you're in full control over the way that people are perceiving you. And at the end of the day, at least for me, this is what my own definition is. It's about letting people see you and be a part of your journey. I'm not a big proponent of coming off as this big polished professional. And it's not that you're not good at what you do, but it's about being real and letting people see two sides of the coin. As you guys know, as authors, creating a character is all about helping people see both sides of them. And that's where it's fun. Like, imagine how boring your personal brand would be if you were just perfect on the dime all the time. No mess ups, no struggle, no, like, there's that would be literally the most boring story ever. There's no tension. And the reason why people follow you and choose to invest in what you have is because they see those both sides. And probably by the end of the workshop, you might have a little bit more clarity about what those two sides would be for you. So you can create that depth and dimension so that when people see you, they see you as someone that they connect with. Now, some of the misconceptions about having a personal brand is that it's all about putting up a face and pretending to be someone you're not. We all see those people online where you look at them and you're like, you can't possibly be this polished and perfect all the time. No way do you have makeup on 24/7. Like, I think that's a perception that a lot of people have, but personal branding isn't about that. I think what's new and what's relevant is that people want to see who you actually are. They're like, we want to see the mess. We want to see the behind the scenes, so that they can appreciate more when they see the professionalism. They can appreciate the work that you put in because you're showing absolutely everything. All right, now that we have that out of the way, let me click on to the next slide. Now I'm going to just sort of paint in broad strokes here, again, trying to just simplify branding. And I'm going to talk about the building blocks of what goes into building a personal brand. I know that often people have a really long laundry list of things that they need. They need their logos and they need their colors, and you need your content strategy. And like, I know it can get really complicated, but just painting in broad strokes here. What having a personal brand is, you mainly need to have three things. The first thing is knowing what your identity is, understanding who you are. The second thing is understanding who you're talking to, your audience, who are the people you're trying to bring into your world. And then the last thing is your strategy. Strategy is a very technical term. What I like to use more is your relationship with your audience. I like to see branding as just drawing the dots and then connecting the two together. Who are you? Who are you talking to? And what's your relationship with these people? And when you have those few things on dial, it suddenly becomes really easy, because it's just like talking to your best friend. You don't have to dress up a certain way. You know who you're talking to. You know what keeps them up at night. They know you, and it's very reciprocal. And when you sort of have that figured out, then you get excited to start sharing content, because it's like talking to your best friend. It's like sending your best friend that dog or cat meme at 3 a.m. Like, that's how easy it's supposed to feel when you have it figured out. So of course, there's a lot that gets packed into each of these things: identity and audience. For most of what we're going to be talking about today, we're just going to be focusing on your identity and really digging into that, and giving you the reassurance that this is something that is always going to be evolving, and it should be. I feel like whenever I see certain people online and their brand has been the same for the past 10 years, my assumption is that they are not growing. And one analogy that I like to use is that as you grow, you need to change out your clothes to fit you. And you're going through puberty, like, oh, your shoes feel tight. Those pants are too short on you. And even when you stop physically growing, your style changes. When I started getting into the workforce, I needed to change my outfit. I needed to go shopping and get semi-formal clothing. And your brand will grow and evolve as you grow as a human being. And it's okay that it changes. The art in having a brand is being able to continue evolving it while still maintaining that certain expectation that people have of the way that you show up. So that's sort of where the line is. It's like it is always changing, but some certain things will always stay the same. And that's sort of like the little dance that you're always playing and experimenting with as you grow your brand. So those are the basic building blocks. But for today, we're mostly going to be digging into what is your brand identity. Now, one thing that I want to sort of dive into before we dig deep into the theory is sort of like a visualization exercise. What I find is that we're often so stuck up in our own heads about like, who am I? Like, am I actually like this? And you always start second guessing yourself. I do too. I do this for a living and I get stuck in my own head. So one thing that I really wanted to do is to sort of get you guys thinking about not yourselves first, but thinking about a character that you really, really see yourself in. Think about your favorite character from like a novel or a movie or a TV show. When you saw them, you were like, oh my God, like that's me, or they're like your hero. And like you loved certain parts about the way that they showed up, and then maybe even some of their flaws, you're like, oh gosh, I do that too. Like I totally see myself in that. Maybe what we can do is maybe for like 5 minutes or so, just like maybe you guys have like a piece of paper or a pen, just like write down who that character is and then list out the things that you really loved about them and why. Like why did those parts of that character really pull you in, and what were some of those flaws, the other side of the coin for that character where that really tore you up because you're like I really don't like this, but I could totally see myself in that too. And maybe for the next 5 minutes, just write those things down. And then afterwards, we can share about that. And that could sort of warm us up to start talking about ourselves. So I'll set a timer for the next 5 minutes. Go ham. And it's okay if you have multiple characters to draw from as well. So as many as you want, but really try to get yourself into the shoes of that character, and then we can share about that afterwards. All right, we have about 1 minute left. So wrap up your thoughts, and then afterwards we'll go around and we can share about our favorite character. All right. And pens down. I feel like the school teachers that's like, all right, pens down, hand in your papers. All right, how was that exercise for you guys? I'm really curious to hear about what you guys have to share. I'll go first and share mine just so we get that out of the way. And then afterwards, you guys can volunteer and share your thoughts. So for me, growing up, I loved Hermione from Harry Potter. She was my hero. Like there was something about the way that she showed up that she was the annoying know-it-all kid. Unfortunately, I was also that kid. I was the straight A student. I always had the answer for everything. Everything was organized and down to a T. But what I really liked about her that I really saw myself in was that she was so good at everything that she was so uptight. She could not let loose, and she needed those rowdy friends who like to cause trouble and to bring her into stuff so that she can really tap into her genius in ways that were totally outside of her comfort zone. But you could see her character evolving, that she was able to not just be book smart, but learn how to apply those things that were in her brain to using those in real life situations that helped people. So growing up, I saw myself a lot in Hermione, and there's other characters that I really love, but that was sort of the first thing that came up to mind for me. Also, thanks for sharing, Valerie, in the chat and just seeing the characters that you guys really resonated with. And also Erin and oh, Marie Folio. Nice.
No, Marie
Awesome.
Forleo
So
was no. She was from earlier. She's the one who's perfect all the time, and you never see Marie Forleo other than she intimidates the heck out of me because of that. Like that was from way back when.
I hear you.
It's funny, that made me feel actually kind of emotional. I thought of two immediately. The first one was actually really new to me, Eloise Bridgerton. Is it her last name, Bridgerton? Wait a minute. Yes, Bridgerton. So she's the sister who is really like not down for any of this marriage stuff, and she's quite awkward, and she speaks her mind, very opinionated and values driven. And the other one, which my best friend since I was 20 calls me Louise, because she is Thelma and I'm Louise, and I am Susan Sarandon and Louise in Thelma and Louise. I'm like, I will kill for my best friend, even if it's stupid. I will act without thinking. Again, really values based. Yeah, so that's me, good, bad, and like step on people's toes and then say sorry after. Yeah.
I love that. Don't mess with her, guys. She's not someone to be contended with. That's amazing.
They're
Thank
all
you so
part of
much
my
for
policy
sharing.
that I will protect and kill for, though, these people here.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. All right, who wants to go first and share about their favorite character or characters? Erin?
All right. So the only one I could really think of was Stephanie Plum because pressure. You guys didn't put me under pressure. I couldn't think of anything else. But really, she was the first fictional character I saw myself in almost literally, because she's a hot mess. She was in her late 20s and she didn't know really how to adult, and all she could take care of was this hamster. So the stuff I wasn't thrilled about that I saw in her was the hot mess, can't adult, very little willpower. What else? Trouble standing up to those she wants, she loves and admires, not good with authority, acting without thinking, stuff like that, and the freaking out about stuff she probably doesn't need to freak out about. But the parts I love that resonated with me for her is the fact that she's resourceful. She's like Danica describes, is better to ask for forgiveness than permission. She's not afraid to blackmail people in order to get what she wants. She's she will protect her friends. She'll act even though she's scared, and she will admit she's wrong if you back her into a corner. So I really liked all that.
I love that. Thank you for sharing, Erin. I really like how there's a lot of contrast, but that's what makes the character really real and it helps you really connect with them. So thank you for sharing that. Who else wants to share their character? Sarah.
So I came up with Evelyn from The Mummy, the first movie specifically. I watched that movie all the time. The thing that really gets me with her is she wants to be this archaeologist and she wants to do all of this stuff and she keeps getting turned down by the men in power. But then there's a scene where she gets really, really drunk and Brendan Fraser's character is like, but I don't get you. And she says, I am a librarian. And it is so funny because it's not at all what she wants to be, but it's who she is. And it's like, you want to do something and sometimes it's just like, but you need to accept who you are first. And I think that's something that's always resonated with me for her character. She's also, her family to her is very important. She just has her one brother who's still alive. Her parents have died, but she carries the picture of them in her locket. And her brother drives her absolutely nuts, but she loves him anyways. And so that's something else that really resonates with me. I don't have a brother, I have two sisters. She's also really smart. She's very pragmatic and she's very goal oriented, which are all things that I identify with too.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. I feel like one of the cool things about really resonating with characters is not just who they are, but seeing the way that they interact with other people, like the way they conduct their relationships. And that's something really good to keep in mind as you're sort of building out your character. Because it's not just who you are, it's how you interact with the people around you, what you choose to tolerate, what you decide to just put your foot down and be like, none of that stuff, or what are you about? So yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's definitely really important to keep in mind as you build out your own character. Who wants to share next? Jess?
Yeah, so this group knows I'm just a big old Jane Austen nerd, so I had to choose from that pool of characters. And so I kind of resonate with a mashup of Mary Crawford from Mansfield Park. She's kind of the minor villain character, if anybody doesn't know, and Elizabeth Bennet, because I feel like Mary Crawford's like the shadow side of Elizabeth Bennet. Like they're both these like kind of smart, sexy, charming women with an irreverent sense of humor that sometimes goes too far. And so, yeah, I kind of resonate with that, I guess, just the, like they're both kind of articulate, but maybe a little unbalanced, and the irreverence is kind of what makes the difference between the shadow or light sides of it. So, and then I also thought of just throwing in a little MTV Daria. I think a lot of us are kind of the librarian archetype, kind of the snarky librarian. So mashup of those three, MTV plus Jane Austen.
That's so cool. I really like the word that you used. It's like the shadow side. I feel like we all sort of have that. And I think when you really understand what that is and use that also as your superpower, that creates a contrast that really pulls people to you, because that's what makes you really real. So thank you for sharing. All right, who wants to share next? Leah?
So I also picked Hermione.
No way.
So I won't spend a lot of time talking about it, but I'm a corporate attorney by training, so like rules are my life, and I think I was a extreme rule follower before that, which is probably why I fell into law. And yeah, I mean, so much about her character. I'm always posting things about her character because she's such a bookworm and intellectual, and I really always admire people who are really smart about things. But I also recognize a lot of her flaws are like also my flaws, like being super rigid and sort of being an overachiever to the point where it's annoying to other people. But I think, and actually, when I think of her, one of the funniest scenes is in The Half-Blood Prince when she's making the potion wrong and she's following the recipe and Harry's telling her, no, you have to do it like this. She's like, no, it says this. And I'm like, that is me all day long. If there's a rule book that says do it this way, I will like die on that hill, even if it's not working. So yeah, that was my person.
I love that. Funny enough, I'm actually reading through the Half-Blood Prince right now. I'm rereading the book series, so I'm like totally nerding out about this. I love that. I love that. Did I miss anybody? I think Ashley, did you have a
hasn't
chance
gone
to
yet.
share?
You're
Yeah.
there, Ashley.
Sorry, I had to run outside to get my son off the bus. I wrote down, I don't know if anybody's ever seen Two Broke Girls on CBS. I resonate with Kat Dennings. She's really sassy and sarcastic and just doesn't give a shit. Danica's nodding her head, thank you. Yeah, she doesn't really follow rules and kind of got secret talents like hobby and doesn't really let anybody in. Sorry, I'm out of breath. Yeah, I had to run outside, it's pouring rain. Yeah, and just like really independent and stuff like that. So yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I loved everything that you guys shared. And I think it's just really cool to sort of step outside of ourselves and see what parts of ourselves we see in other characters, because it's really good information to help us understand what parts of myself do I want for people to see. So that was just sort of an exercise to get you warmed up to start thinking about your own brand. So what I like to do whenever I talk to my clients about building their brand is sort of think of it as you are building out your own character. And when you're too close to yourself, I like to just do that exercise where you think about other characters that you really like, and then take bits and pieces of those and draw from that as inspiration to sort of build out your own character. Some of the questions that you guys might want to write down for yourself as you're sort of building out your own character are these ones here. Under the visualization exercise section. So some questions you might ask yourself is, well, what does your character look like? And sort of think of this character as this is the best version of you. This is the version of you that's going to kick down doors and take no shit. Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear. Kick down doors and take no crap from people. That feels no fear. And even if you do feel fear, you step out and you just go and gun for it anyway. Like the best version of you on your best day. What do you look like? What do you wear? Like what's your like I'm gonna like save the world outfit? What do you feel comfortable in? What do you sound like when you talk? What is the tone of your voice? How do you interact with people? What's your personality like? Are you playful and fun? Are you sort of sarcastic? Do you have like a cheeky side? Are you serious but have this dry sense of humor? Like, what's your personality like? And when you think about your personality, think of two sides of the coin. You're like, I am this, but I'm also that. And that's sort of where you create that contrast. And also, what are your superpowers? I feel like whenever people have a personal brand, people know you for something, and it could be a skill. Like for me, people know me a lot as a designer first. They're like, oh, if I need pretty things, I'm going to talk to Rachel because she can make anything look good. But it could also be some of her soft skills. Some people got a wicked sense of humor. And when you talk to them, you just love that experience. So what are your superpowers? And yeah, these are some things that I'll probably get you guys to think about on your own. But draw from the characters that you really like and use those as inspiration as you stitch together this picture of what your identity is, as well as building out what your backstory is. What's the journey that led you to where you are today? Where was that point of struggle? Where did you grow? And where are you today? And where are you going? Like, obviously, you guys are masters at building characters. So it's fun when you get to build it out for yourself. And whenever you get stuck, it's always good to check it with someone else. It's good that you guys are in a group, because then maybe you guys have like a Facebook group and you guys can post up in the group and be like, hey guys, this is my character. Like, would love some feedback based on your experience of me, how accurate this is. Is there areas where I'm like missing, or how am I coming off? Yeah, one thing that I do want to stress though is that when you're creating your character, it's important for you to set boundaries with what you keep to yourself and what you show to the world. And one thing that a coach taught to me a while back that I still keep today is that there's a difference between what's personal and what's private. And you could, meaning that you could share things that are personal to you that aren't related to what you do. For example, I love cats and dinos. I love collecting stuffies, and there's certain things about my personal life that I'm super open about. I share it because it allows me to connect with people. But for certain things that are private, such as certain things with like family or relationships, that or maybe like you're dealing with stuff within yourself, maybe you're struggling with anxiety and you're just not ready to share that with the world. You're like, I need to figure my shit out first before I could put that out there. Then those are boundaries that you get to set, and there's no obligation at all to share something that you are not comfortable with. Deal with it first, and then when you feel that it's appropriate and you want to share it, and if you feel that it's something that your audience would benefit from, then you can consider putting it out. But there's no pressure at all to be like, hey guys, like I'm gonna vlog myself 24/7 and let people see everything. You don't have to put that kind of pressure on yourself. Aaron says it almost feels like building a character for live action role playing, except we get to make sure the actual pieces of ourselves. Yeah, exactly. So it's just about picking and choosing what people see. And when you realize that you have power over that, then it doesn't feel so scary anymore. Now we get to the fun part where I remember there were a lot of questions that you guys had about how you visually express your brand. There's a couple of things that I wanted to go through here, but I want to just sort of quickly go around and ask you guys, what are some things that really trip you up when it comes to visually expressing yourself? Like, I know that there's a couple things we're going to go over, but just initially, so I can like get a feel for the room. Yeah, you could raise your hand if you want to share about like, what are some of like the biggest points of struggle when you're trying to put something out online or make a decision about like your colors or your fonts? What do you guys mostly struggle with? Leia?
So I don't have like a web page or anything yet. I just have an Instagram, and one thing I struggle with, I just started it like a couple months ago, is staying like consistent with the imagery. I kind of like whatever feels good that day as what I put up. And I've had to go back and start like deleting stuff, curating, because I'm like, oh my God, I'm all over the place, you know? So kind of what you were talking about earlier is like, you know, people seeing you and like knowing like, okay, this is that person, this is what I should expect. And like how narrow do you have to be in terms of sticking to like, these are my colors, these are my fonts, and like how much room there is for creative expression.
Awesome. Yeah, consistency is really challenging. And that's something we're going to dive into in a little bit to figure out, how do you stay consistent, but not the exact same every single time. So consistent, but still interesting. What else are you guys struggling with when it comes to visually expressing yourself? Jess?
I guess coming up with a combination of like the colors in our palette and the fonts and just getting a look that's consistent and harmonious, something that looks good together and, you know, looks like me.
I hear you. Colors are very tricky. I feel like it's hard because there's so many possibilities. And when everything kind of looks good, it's hard to tell what really resonates or feels like you. So we're going to talk about colors in a little bit too. Anyone else have anything they want to share?
I'll say.
Yeah.
I can't think of what the right word is, but I worry not for my author persona, but for my coaching persona. I worry that I'm going to come across as ridiculous, like not without the right authority, like too much of a goof or too flippant. Yeah.
I really get that. And that's something that I struggled with initially when I was building my own brand, because I'm not the suit and tie sort of person. And it's an art to sort of articulate fun and playful and like can take a joke, like that sort of energy without coming off as like you're a total goof and you're unprofessional and you don't know what you're talking about. Finding that balance is indeed really challenging. All right. I think I'm gonna, oh yeah, Sarah.
So I think my biggest trouble is figuring out why I like the things that I want to add to my visual brand. So, for example, I've been recently looking at cover designers for my books. And I can tell the ones that I like, but I don't know why I like it. And so if I don't know why I like it, I don't know how to sort of emulate it or keep the theme going. So I think that's my big problem.
Yeah, I totally understand that. Sometimes it's interesting because our brains work in a funny way. Like we like something before we logically understand why it tickles our brain a certain way. And I think one thing that I wanted to mention is when it comes to visuals, the visuals are just an expression of your identity. So the more you understand what that identity is, the easier it is to figure out the visual side of things of how you express it. Because there is certain things like color theory to sort of help you narrow down the colors that would represent you or certain design elements. Once you sort of really understand what's the character and the vibe that I'm trying to convey, those words will ultimately help you make the decisions on the visual end of what you like and how you want to express yourself. Okay, I really like that. So for the sake of time, I'm gonna just dive right in. Now, this is where there's gonna be quite a bit of information, but again, you're gonna get the slides afterwards, so you don't have to worry about taking all of the notes right away. So there's sort of 4 key things that I like to focus on when it comes to visually expressing your brands. And the first thing is just to start with keywords. And I know you guys are good with words, so it's good for you because that's where we always start with. What I like to do is to pick a few keywords that help me describe my character and use those to lead my search for my mood board, which I know we're going to be diving into later. So for me, some of those words were playful, badass, edgy, and trying to find, I usually like to say 3 is a good number of keywords. When you just have one, it feels a little flat. I like to try to find like an assortment of keywords that provide contrast. So for me, I'm like cute and playful, but still cool, casual, and badass. Those were more than 3 words, but sort of that kind of contrast. And if you pick 3 of those keywords for you that really best describe your brand, that will sort of help you lead your search and provide that point of focus and just sort of bring everything together. So yes, start with a keyword and then you could sort of branch out from there. Next up, I want to talk about colors. I know that colors can be a really big mystery for people because there is a certain psychology to the way that colors affect our brains. As far as branding goes, there's sort of like a rule of thumb that's good to keep in mind, where the number of colors that you choose, I always recommend maximum 3 colors for your brand. I like to say it's good to have one primary color that people know you for, and then maybe have 1 to 2 secondary colors to balance it, sort of like as accents or pops of color. But more often than not, the simpler you can keep it, the better, because that's usually what people see and recognize you for. For myself, pink really is my brand color. And the way that you choose your color is, one, starting with your keywords to sort of see what's the feeling you're trying to convey. Are you calm and soothing? Are you bubbly and playful? Are you serious with a little bit of an edge to it? And then using those words, one thing that I like to do is, like, Google Images is my best friend, is to even just type in those keywords and see what images come up. And sometimes you might even see there's a certain pattern with the images that Google pulls up, and there might be certain palettes that accurately reflect those words. Or Pinterest or Instagram are also a good place to look for that. But generally, rule of thumb, keep it simple. Less is more. The more colors that you have, the more confusing it can be, and the more choices you're going to have to make when it comes to visually representing yourself. So keep it simple for the colors. Focus on the feeling you're trying to communicate. The colors that you pick will sort of be influenced by that feeling. And yeah, so that's sort of generally how you would go about choosing your colors. I'm not going to dive into color psychology right now because it could get pretty complicated, but that's sort of the rule of thumb for colors. Fonts. I think there was a question about fonts that came up, and I know that fonts can be complicated because they're not as upfront as images. Now, fonts, all fonts actually do have a personality. Like, when you see a certain font, you do feel a certain way. Most of the time, we logically can't put 2 and 2 together, but all fonts do have a personality. And when it comes to a rule of thumb, when you are picking fonts for your brand, I generally like to say it's kind of like colors. Less is more, and pick 2 fonts. One that is your main font, and then another one that's sort of like an accent font. And there's sort of like some best practices that you should or shouldn't do with fonts, with font pairings, for example. So the first rule of thumb is, if you have one, I called it a straight font, but basically everything that you see here on this slide, these are straight fonts. There's no curves, there's no edges, there's no loopy loops. It's a straight font. And then if you have a straight font, you have permission to pair that with a fancy font, something in cursive, something that looks more handwritten, and that provides a little bit of contrast. Or if you have a bit of a more modern feel, you can have technically 2 straight fonts. It's just one is a bold version of it, and another one is like a lighter version. So you could sort of see that on the slide here, where for my headers, I have this big, chunky, prominent font. It's simple. And then for the text, I have something that's thinner, but it's still like, they're both straight fonts, but then you still have that contrast. The big no-no is to never have 2 fancy fonts paired together. I have a bit of an example here where you see 2 curly, fancy, bubbly fonts. You put them side by side, and immediately you kind of have to squint, and it's hard to read. Your brain kicks into overdrive, and those 2 fancy fonts are competing against each other. So as far as font pairings go, generally speaking, avoid having 2 fancy fonts being paired together, just because it is impossible for people to read it, and there's no visual hierarchy there. And in terms of spacing, when you're sort of, if you guys, I'm not sure if you're designing your own book covers, or maybe you just create your own social posts, the rule of thumb is that when you're working with typography, more space is always better. Because when words are really cramped together, when there's barely any space between the lines, people have to work a lot harder than they should to read your text, and you don't want that. So when in doubt, more space is always better. And as much as possible, if you've got big chunks of text, try to increase the space between your lines, and that allows your text just space to breathe. I like to call it breathing space, and that allows your eye to relax as it's reading through a chunk of text. So that's the rule of thumb for fonts. And then lastly, just for graphic style, this is something that you develop over time. it will require a lot of experimentation. And I like to think of it as cooking. You have your base ingredients. Like if I'm making an omelet, for example, I know I'm going to need eggs. I'm going to need a bit of oil, maybe some cheese, and then maybe some ham. And then you basically mix and match every time you cook it to see how you like the taste of it. Similarly with branding, you should pick a few colors that you really like just to experiment with. Pick a few fonts that you like. Go with your mood board and the style you're trying to emulate, and then mix and match, and then see what combination feels good for you. And as you throw things together, you're going to eventually start seeing a pattern that feels really good for you, that you see people engaging with. And when you feel like you figured something out, then you can sort of set that as a rule, and then you keep building on it as you go. And this style is something that will evolve over time. So that's sort of where we start talking about, well, how do you stay consistent while always still evolving? It sounds almost like a paradox. But what I like to say in this is just focus on expressing your character. And as we know in stories, characters do evolve. Hermione, for example, is always still Hermione, but her character matures over time. And then the same thing will be for your brand as well. And so will the way that you express it. It will grow and mature, but the core of it will always stay the same. So I wish that I had like a one size fits all solution, but for graphic style, it's just going to have to be spaghetti against the wall. When you figure out your key ingredients, just keep throwing them, chucking them together in different combinations, and eventually you'll find something that works for you. If you want to shortcut that process, there are a lot of designers out there who could sort of help take a look at all of your keywords and the vibe you're trying to communicate and just create a preset style for you. That's something that I do for clients, and that's something you could do to shortcut that process. But if you want to do the spaghetti against the wall kind of thing, which I totally did for my brand for the first 3 years, that is totally fine too. Sometimes you don't know until you explore. So that's basically the ins and outs of the visual side of things for your brand. And just the last question about how do you keep everything consistent? Branding at the end of the day is all about consistency. And one of the secrets that I have, even for myself, is you should document everything that you come up with. And I'm the kid that like to follow rules. So in a sense, it's like you get to create your own rules. For me, I have this document called my brand playbook, where I literally throw all of the guidelines for my brand. I'm like, these are the colors that I use. These are the fonts. This is the styling. This is my message. This is how I show up. And literally it's kind of like you're building out your character and the way that your character shows up. And you're just sort of setting parameters. And I actually often find myself going back and revisiting and updating things, because it's kind of like the Bible for your brand. So I always say, as you discover things and as you figure out what works, document it, so then you're not reinventing the wheel every time. And in the case that you forget, you always have a document to refer back to. Use your character as the center point for everything. The way that you express your character will evolve, but the core of your character will always stay the same. And when it comes to expressing yourself on different platforms, one thing that I like to think about is that every platform, like Facebook or Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, I like to see them all as different venues. And every venue has a different tone. A cocktail party is going to be different from a classroom. The way you dress, the way you show up, the way you interact with those people. So I think a lot of it is understanding the context of the platform that you're on. What headspace are people in when they're hanging out in this space? What are they looking for? Who are those people that you associate with on those platforms, and what do they need to hear from you? So there isn't necessarily a one size fits all solution when it comes to presenting yourself on platforms. It really depends on who you have on those platforms and what's your relationship with them. Because my relationship with my Instagram audience is a bit different from the relationship I have with people on Facebook. Facebook is a lot of friends, family, and distant relatives for me that live in Hong Kong who kind of stalk my stuff and don't really know what I'm doing. Context is totally different from Instagram, where I have a lot of like my creative friends. A lot of my clients hang on there. They expect me to show up differently on Instagram than I do on Facebook. So just lead with the understanding the context will give you the information you need to know what to say. Again, you're the same person, but depending on the context, what you share in each of those platforms depends on the relationship you have with your audience. So I hope that makes sense for consistency just across platforms and the way you present yourself online. And now we get to the fun parts with mood boards. Now, I know that all of you did a little bit of homework, and I have a few samples that we're going to be going through. But before we do all that, I'm actually going to share my mood board first, the one that I came up with when I was building my brand, just to sort of give you guys like visuals on and just like to sort of break down the process behind the scenes of what I did for myself. And then afterwards, we're going to dive into each of yours and then just give a little gentle feedback in terms of how you can be updating and improving them. So I'll go first, leading by example here. So this is the mood board that I came up with for my brand. The keywords that I had for this was cute, cheeky, and badass. And I think the interesting thing about me growing up was that I was the tomboy. I was cursed with the fact that I'm like a really small, petite, and cute, and people like sort of look at me and they pat me on the head. You're like, oh, you're so cute. But I had like kind of like little dog syndrome where I'm like, don't call me cute. Like I can take care of myself. Like I always had that sort of defiant attitude. And the way that I really wanted to express that was, yeah, there is a side of me that I want to acknowledge that likes all of the cute things like dinos and cats and cartoons, but there's this edge to it where I'm like, I will let you close if I like you, but it's sort of standoff-ish. And I really wanted to express that in my mood board, where a lot of it is very like street or cyberpunk. There's graffiti and there's like a little bit of an artsy edge to it. So and then I'll sort of show an example of what it looks like when that's applied, where I eventually adapted that into like my website or my podcast or my Instagram. So this is just sort of an example of what it can look like when you take your mood board just as inspiration and then you create a style that you apply to your social media presence. So you could sort of see the direct translation of that. And I guess afterwards I'll share my handles, and if you guys want to, feel free to snoop and stalk. I have my website and my Instagram, so you can sort of see how you put two and two together. But yeah, that's just sort of an example of what it looks like when you apply everything. So that's me. Now it is your turn. So I think what we're gonna do is I'll stop sharing my screen. And then I think, Donna, you're going to pull up the mood boards on your computer. I think you'll go first, and then we'll sort of go through everyone. Everyone will have their turn. Don't worry, I'm very gentle. Our job here is just to sort of help you work through the parts where you might be stuck with expressing yourself. So, all right, I'll let you share your screen, and then we'll dive into it.
All right, then I'm going to open this one. I'm not sure how I'm going to do it so that it keeps, I guess I just have to share the whole screen and that'll make it work. Okay, hang on. Just so that it is clean. Share screen, it'll be the whole desktop because I'm going to keep swapping them out. Okay, bloop. This one is, let me just shrink it a little bit. Okay, you'll never guess who that is.
Amazing. Awesome. I love this. So what I'll do for each of you is I always like to start off with asking the question of what is it that you were trying to communicate? What were the key words that you sort of had in your mind when you were building this? And maybe where were the areas that you got stuck with, like trying to express that? So what was going on in your head, and what were you trying to express when you were creating your mood board?
I think the words are very much joy, acceptance, and fun. And I guess joy and fun are kind of the same, but I'm trying to communicate like all love welcome here, no shame. Yeah, that's where that's going. And
nice.
That I'm Canadian, because that seems to be important to me.
I love that. And I think you actually did a really good job with expressing that. Like, I feel that from your colors where it's got this it's got like this bubbly feeling to it, and I could definitely see it in the pictures that you have. And I think one thing that you can even try, and I didn't even have it in my mood board, was to see if you can find some fonts online that you could search up, maybe quotes that you really like, and add those to the mood board as well. I feel like, I know when it comes to mood boards, sometimes we stick just with pictures or with colors, but one thing that you can also do is to maybe try to find a few fonts that you really like that also express that kind of feeling, and then add those to your mood board as well. But I really like the images that you picked here, where you have like a couple I think I like the stock images that you picked. I also like the picture of yourself that you included in there. I feel like it really captures that feeling very well. And was there something that you were trying to express that didn't quite make it through, or how are you feeling about the mood board as it is right now?
One thing I don't know that I'm not sure if it expresses that I'm a competent human. I think kind of it expresses that I'm going to be up in your face, or I'm happy to be up in your face. But not, I don't know if empathy is really important to me. And I think it's really kind of, it's really in my core of who I am. But the way I express that is with this kind of all welcome, like, well, all other welcoming people welcome. So yeah, I don't know if I express that. And if this is the mood board for Author Ever After, I guess, I mean, obviously nobody's going to be looking at dildos specifically and all of the, but yeah, so in terms of how that gets represented publicly, I'm not sure how I translate that into something that's actually connected to teaching moments, I guess.
Right, right. Well, I actually think that, and I think maybe this is just something that we have to demystify, is that even if you have, honestly, pictures of dildos in your mood board, you could still come off as competent, where this is more about the energy that you're putting out. And this is where you'll have to probably pair it with the right words, especially when you're putting out social posts. You can have like a really raunchy looking image, but then there could be a caption that really gets people sitting up and listening. And that's where you can have that really cool contrast, because fortunately or unfortunately, visuals alone can't fully communicate everything. When you have the right pairing of the visuals and the words, I think that's where people will get that sense that you know what it is that you're talking about. So you could use the image to seriously just grab people's attention, and they're like, ooh, dildos, or whatever. But then the statement is something that gets them to sit up a little straighter, or to think a little bit deeper. So that might be something that you can play with. I feel like the visuals are good. You just need to find the right word combination when you're making your posts or sharing about this online.
Thank you. I love that idea of contrast, because that feels very authentic to me. The contrast that, yeah. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, totally.
Who next? Should we just go in order as they are here? Or do you have someone, Sarah, do you want to go next? Can we just do this way, Rachel?
Whatever works best.
Okay.
Don't worry, I'm very gentle. So
Okay,
I'm not gonna make anyone cry with a critique. We're just seeing opportunities to add and support with what you're doing.
So there's Sarah.
All right. Amazing. All right, Sarah, tell me a little bit more about what was on your mind when you were creating this? What were you trying to communicate?
The one thing that I really want to communicate is my authenticity. So I really want to bring like yes, with the boundaries, of course, but I want to bring out that I'm bringing myself, because one of the things that I'm going to be doing is I'm writing in two different genres. They're quite different. One is urban fantasy and one is contemporary romance. So even though I've got these two very different genres that I'm going to be writing in. I want people to understand that I am like the person in the middle. So I went with red and gold initially because I felt like the red was a good romance color and gold was a good fantasy color. And then I chose colors that kind of went with those for that reason. So there's some of the blue and some of the pink, which are sort of like accents. And then also another thing that I wanted to put forward is a little bit of quirkiness. So I've got like the torn pages, and then the goat, because I actually am getting 3 goats this summer in like a month, which is very exciting.
Oh my gosh.
So they are going to feature in my Instagram posts and Facebook posts and stuff. Yeah, so those are kinds of the things that I was looking at, was the authentic and a little bit quirky.
I like
Yeah.
that. I like that. Amazing. And were there parts of it that you felt really stuck with when trying to communicate, where you're like not sure if something was coming through? Were there parts of that you felt really stuck with?
I think figuring out, like, so when I was thinking about authenticity, I was thinking, well, what are the things that I'm drawn to? So then I did a search for like lakes, because I'm a huge fan of going to lakes, and I actually live across the street from one, which is really cool. And then I was like, I also really like nature, because that kind of feeds in. So I chose a picture of one of my favorite kinds of flowers. And then also the butterfly. And then I also really like travel. So I started coming up with these things that I'm like, what are the things that I really like, so that I can put them into the mood board. But I don't know if they are telling the story that I want to tell, I guess.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that. I really like the combination of images and colors that you have here. The initial feeling that I got from the overall mood board is, I think the first thing that came to my mind was timeless. Like that's sort of the feeling that I got from it, where I see like the pages of the book and the hourglass and the look of the lakes. And I wouldn't say like it's not traditional. Like it feels very classic. It kind of reminds me of it's like Beauty and the Beast or Hogwarts vibes, where I could totally see it being, it's like it's very magical. It's kind of tucked away. And I think timeless is the best way for me to describe it. Now, if you're saying that you want to add, like if you want to add some sort of quirky feeling to it, then that might be a little bit of an edge that might be missing from this mood board. And maybe that's something that you can look more into communicating, because the overall tone of this is that it feels very it's very thoughtful. It's leaning more towards serious, so maybe there might be some more playful elements, maybe some graphics, maybe if you can search up online, that you might add to this to sort of add that contrast, because right now it feels very it's definitely more on the serious side. So I think that's something that you can explore as well. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. All right. And this one is for Ashley, right? All right. Ashley, would you mind sharing a little bit about what you are trying to communicate with your mood board?
Yeah, so I'm a very real person. I'm very realistic with anything in life. Just a realism is my thing. So I was really just going for just trying to be very authentic to myself, and like everything that I do is very natural to me and my personality, and I'm very real, and I'm a boss. I mean, that is my last name, so I might as well use it. So yeah, that was kind of just all I was really going for. So
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And were there any parts of creating this mood board where you felt stuck that with trying to communicate? Were there some parts that you're trying to visually express that didn't quite, that you feel like you had troubles getting that through?
maybe with the neon, because I'm not an Instagram person. I don't really like social media. I'll scroll through Facebook, but that's it. So I was just kind of trying to think of like what would be something consistent that I could like portray as. And I really liked the neon signs. I don't know, it just kind of spoke to me a little bit. So I just kind of saw those and I was like thinking to myself, oh, well, that could be like a consistent kind of brand thing, I guess. I don't know if I really struggled with it. It's just kind of something I saw and I decided on it. So yeah, I don't know. That's it.
No, awesome. No. I really like that. I feel like even just from like initial feelings, the funny thing is that this mood board, if I were to create a mood board for Vancouver, where it is that I'm based, this accurately captures the culture of the city where there's like a mix of nature and outdoorsiness, but there's also like city life. Like I feel like there's an interesting balance that I see here, especially with the neon. It's cool that you brought it up because neon instantly makes me think of nightlife, like going out to the club and then lots of lights and disco and street lights and smoking and that sort of like almost grungy. I'm not sure if grunge is the right word to say it, but sort of like that energy. But then you have that contrast of nature and tranquility. And I like some of the graphics or quotes that you even put up of like coffee shops and typewriters. And I like that sort of contrast between urban life and nature. And that's sort of the initial feelings that I have off of this. And if you're happy with this, I think this mood board accurately captures that. But just from an outside perspective, that's sort of the feelings that I have captured. It's very calming, but it's got that sort of urban edge to it.
Hey, Ashley, does that match the stories that you're telling? Like, does that match how you're feeling? That calming with an edge?
I I liked how you called it grungy. I don't know why it sounds almost dirty, but it's like, I mean, yeah, 'cause my stuff's a little dirty. Not in the smut romance sense. But yeah, I guess grungy is, I don't know, urban. Yeah, it fits. So I guess that's good.
Well done. Cool.
Amazing. Yay.
All right. Where's Aaron? He's popping up so giant. Aaron.
Awesome. All right, Erin, let's dive in. Tell me a little bit more about your mood board and what you're trying to communicate.
I was thinking really of this series because the author persona I'm going to be using for this series, I just kind of developed within this community. So it's all kind of linked. The author persona is going to be very much linked to this world, and yeah. So I want it to feel it's going to be city based, so that's important. It's going to be basically super powered romance, but it's going to be villains and vigilantes. So there's superpowers, but I was thinking it's not quite a tagline yet, but the whole gist of it is everybody likes the superhero, but don't you really want someone who's going to put you before the world?
Ooh.
And that's kind of the feeling I want. So like the neon sign is really important. You were talking about only having one main color and then like two secondary colors. I think I want that orange color in the middle. There's a website that called it Spanish Orange, and I want to keep that one for my main color because I feel like the fire really emphasizes that danger and that excitement. And then I kind of want to keep, I kind of want black and maybe that teal color, the one at the right end, the 7A. I think, because when I first found it, it was copper and teal combination that really jumped out at me. And so I want to keep that orange, the teal, and the black. But I'm still figuring out my feel for it. But I want the bricks. I want the chain link fence. I want the graffiti. I'm trying to figure out my 3 words that you were talking about. And I want to be relatable. I am a hot mess, so that needs to be included. And then I need another word that's not quite, I don't know what the 3rd word is.
That's okay. That's
Uh,
something that you can sit on. But what I feel is that the first vibes that I got off of this was like Batman, Gotham City. Those are like the first things that came to my mind, and I feel like you did a really good job of capturing that. Where I think dark and grungy might be like the words that I would use to describe this mood board, and I think that's something you can like lean even more into, where it would probably be a darker color palette. I can see it being kind of like, when you're on your device and you can have like light mode and dark mode, it'll mostly your theme would be like dark, like black or dark gray. I could see orange being like a really good color for you, and then maybe balance it out with that teal, and it would sort of have that sort of grungy vibe, and I think it's really good tone setting, where the light, it could provide that contrast, because it's not all dark obviously, but the neon signs and then the light and the orange, it's what could provide that contrast when you're visually expressing the other side of the coin for your brand and for this world that you're creating. So yeah, I really like what it is that you're trying to communicate here.
Yay.
Okay, next one. Yeah. Okay. Jess. Jess. Oops. There we go.
Awesome. All right, Jess, tell me a little bit more about what you're thinking when you made this mood board.
Okay, well, so I write historical romance, so there's kind of this element of being transported to a romantic time in the past. Most of my novels, they're very Jane Austen inspired, but sexy. And so the English country house is a big part of that setting, like meadows and woods and old manor houses, things like that. And it's usually like kind of these smart, snarky heroines who have some kind of scientific or artistic bent to them. And so there's a little bit of weirdness to maybe like their sense of humor or something. So like the moth on the corset, like there's always sex in my novels, like explicit scenes. But like I have one heroine who wants to be a scientific illustrator and she's like into entomology and things like that. And another's a botanist. So that's sort of the world and my characters. I was trying to capture that visually. And I guess with my colors, I was looking at like chlorophyll green, sky blue, and then like, it's obviously kind of over the map. I think I picked too many colors, either the violet or the red, maybe just to communicate like a punch of sexiness. That's what I was going for.
Yeah, no, the first feeling that I got is I felt like it's like Downtown Abbey. I think the other day I saw my mom was like binge watching through the series, and I immediately thought of that when I sort of saw your mood board. I even like the way that you arranged it too, because the way that you overlap it, it felt kind of like a scrapbook. And even the way that it's presented sort of captures that feeling. In terms of colors, what I find is that the beige background actually works really well, because I feel like white is very modern. It creates that stark contrast. So having a beige background sort of adds that, it's more aged. I think that's sort of the word I'm going for, like that aged, old timey feel. Whereas I think purple is a really good color. The purple that you picked was really nice. I think that would work really well to help communicate that romance. A purple and red, I would lean more towards the purple, and I like the green that you have. That might just be an accent color. So maybe like the main color would be purple, and then the green and the red might be more accent colors that you can bring in on the side to highlight. But I think you did a really good job of communicating that with your mood board. And were there other things that you were trying to communicate that you had a hard time putting across, or do you feel good about what you've created so far with your mood board?
I guess the only thing I wonder is like if my personality is in it. That was one thing that we kind of talked about. Like I think it conveys my stories, but does it convey an author personality?
Mm. Well, in that case, I definitely sense the story. I think the question would be, do you feel that this accurately captures the character that you're trying to portray for yourself? I find that sometimes for authors, the stories that you create are different from the personality that you have. There might be some elements of that. And I think the question would be, if there's some part of your character that's missing, then again, use those keywords that we talked about earlier and see if you can add a flavor of that into here. Or if the choice for you is that this is the side of you that you really want people to see and just for them to focus on that, then that could be your sole focus. So I think that that question sort of goes down to your choice of which parts of you that you want to communicate. And if there's something that's not coming through, find that keyword and then find images that you think accurately capture and represent that, and then add those into your mood board.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. All right, who's up next?
We have, Tammy had a medical thing, so she had to go off, but let's, can you do Tammy's and then we'll wrap up the rest, even though she's not here. She actually provided, so what I guess we could do is maybe you could say what you're capturing in this. She did the first one on the left first, and then she submitted a more simple one after. So I'm not sure which one she's mostly wanted to go with.
Beautiful. Okay, no, that's okay. I think I could work with both of these. I think sometimes it's hard when I don't have Tammy on board to ask like, what were you thinking? But even just like from initial thoughts, I really like the color palette palette. I think the blue and this sort of like muddy, rusty red is a really good combination with each other. I feel like whenever I see this, I see I I kind of think of Twilight, like as far as romance novels go. I sort of like I think of Twilight, like some sort of like it's like a vampire romance novel. And I think that there's a little bit of an edge to it where I like that there's like pictures of the cat, and it's sort of I feel like there's this contrast between hominess, and then I could feel like there's some like tension with the relationships there. I sort of sense like both of those things. I think probably maybe I can get some feedback from Tammy later about what she was trying to convey that maybe she had a hard time getting across. But that's sort of the initial feeling that I have with the mood board here. So yeah, we can get some more updated feedback afterwards. But was that everything for the mood boards?
I think, let me stop sharing. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, awesome. So I know that there was quite a bit. I wish I could spend like much longer going through feedback with everybody, but what I was thinking about, let me just share my screen again. Not sure how much time we have. I don't know how long people can stay, but if you guys had specific questions, burning questions to ask me, I wanted to have a little bit of space to go over that. And then, yeah, if we have time afterwards, I'll share quickly about how it is that I can help you guys afterwards if you need some additional support. And then that should be everything for today. So are there any questions that you guys have that I didn't quite address here, but you're like, while I have her on the call, I'm gonna have to ask her? Feel free to pop those into either the chat or just raise your hand, and I'll see if I can answer them.
Just unmute yourself if you've got a question. No questions?
Can I ask a question? Didn't want to talk over anybody. Could you talk a little more about font choices? Like one thing for my mood board, I'm trying to convey like a sense of the past, but also I want to feel like a younger kind of fresh author, like some historical romances, you know, they've got really scripty, hard to read font, and I don't want to look like that. And like, how can you, like, could you give any specific advice for if you're trying to look classic, but also like fresh?
Absolutely. What I could do actually, let me switch over my screen and I can show you a tool that I use to just browse through fonts. I actually like to, sometimes when I'm stuck for inspiration, is to go on Google Fonts. This is a resource that is open and available to everybody. And all of the fonts on Google are actually open source fonts. So you can actually download any of these and use them both for personal and for commercial purposes. This is where I actually look for a lot of the fonts for a lot of my clients. And one of the things that you can do when you're sort of stuck is to browse through the categories. In this case, what I might do is to maybe even look through like the handwriting fonts, especially when it comes to, I know romance, a lot of people use cursive, and there's a lot of different fonts here. And then some of them I would say are probably harder to read. If you're looking to go for something that is like an in-between of like more traditional and romantic, but there's like a contemporary edge to it, some certain fonts that I might recommend, like this font here, for example, is more on the traditional side. It's also a little hard to read. So when it comes to cursive fonts, legibility, I would say, is like the biggest priority. Everything else sort of comes second. So if you want something a little more contemporary, let me just scrub through and see if I can find something that's good. Like this is very traditional, like super scripty. All of the letters are very perfect looking. There are some handwritten fonts out there that are scripty, but they look more handwritten. I'm seeing if I can find a few fonts on here that accurately represent that. If not, I might just go on Google Images. Okay. Can't seem to find anything really good here. Let me just type up script font so then you can sort of see what I mean. So these sorts of fonts, like this one right here, for example, is something that's a little bit more modern. And you could sort of see that it's almost got like this really handwritten feel to it. There's a difference between these fonts here, for example, and the fonts here that they're very manufactured. It's almost like too perfect. And this is where it can potentially get borderline cheesy. So if you want something that's a little more contemporary, I definitely recommend looking into some more script fonts like this that feel more handwritten, kind of like somebody did calligraphy or like hand lettering for you. Those are sort of the fonts that I would recommend. And there's a lot of different places online where you can buy these fonts, and I think you could even test run it to see what works for you. So that's what I would recommend in terms of fonts. I think specifically for romance, this is a lot of the types of fonts that you guys would be edging into, just because romance is very scripty and flowy and it's got that sort of energy to it. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Awesome. All right, let me switch my screen back to here. Does anyone else have any questions? No.
Looks like not.
Awesome. All right. Well, I won't take too much of your time. Oh, sorry, Jess, did you have another question?
I'm sorry, I do.
No,
Can I ask
don't
one more
apologize.
question about colors? I've been curious how like the colors in a palette relate to each other. Like if it's good to choose complementary or like colors next to each other in the wheel. Like could you quickly enough talk about like color theory as relates to a 3-color palette? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I know color theory can get a little complicated, but if I were to sort of super simplify it, let me pull up my screen again, and I'll just pull up color wheel. Okay, so without getting too complicated, I know that when we talk about complementary colors, when it comes to picking colors, there's a couple different ways that you can choose a palette. Where sometimes you can choose colors that are beside each other on the color wheel. So, for example, like red, orange, and yellow, sort of like sunset colors, and that could totally work for you. For example, my brand is just black and white, straight, like yeah, black and white and very pink. Um, and it depends on the energy that you're trying to convey. What I generally like to recommend for people is to provide some kind of contrast. So, in the case that you have, for example, a couple warm colors beside each other, I recommend adding an element that is a cooler color just to provide a little bit of balance so it's not so flat looking. So, for example, if you do like red, orange, and yellow, maybe add in a little bit of purple. So then you have more, so it creates a bit more of a dynamic range and it feels kind of like a sunset. Or, for example, if you are doing like a more cooler palette, like if you had this teal and green, kind of more like tropical vibes, then maybe add a yellow to it. So that adds a little bit of a pop of color. So whenever you're picking colors, I generally say the rule of thumb is keep contrast in mind, have a main palette in mind. If it's warm, then pick one cool accent. Or if vice versa, if you have a cool palette, pick one warm accent. And if you're not sure, just pull up the color wheel and sort of see what the colors look like when they're beside each other. And really, if in doubt, there's actually lots of color palettes online that you could search, even just search up. So for example, even for me, if I wanted to find like a really cool like sunset palette and looking at the color wheel, like you're not able to make heads or tails of it, I could even type in sunset color palette, and then you can actually see a couple different examples that they pull up, and then you could choose for yourself if you like a more muted look, if you want something more vibrant, if you want something more pastel. So the good thing is that you don't have to put in a lot of effort to find a good palette if you know what words you're going to use to describe it. So you can even see here, Google's already recommending me a bunch of different other types of palettes, and you can use that as a starting point to determine what feels good for you. Did that answer your question? Awesome. Okay. Let's flip back to the screen here. Any other questions before we get to the tail end of our workshop? Okay. All right. So one quick thing that I wanted to bring up in the case that you guys still have questions and you're trying to implement everything we shared today, but you get kind of stuck, I do want to make a mention of how I can support you guys if you guys want some more one-on-one help. So one thing that I actually do for my clients is something called the Brandstorm. It's a 90-minute brand strategy intensive that I do one-on-one together with you to help you find the clarity that you need for your brand before you go hands in to implement everything. Like we talked about today, a lot of the visuals and a lot of the pretty stuff is just a reflection of the identity that you're trying to communicate. And in the case, like you're just stuck in your own head and you want someone outside of your own head to have a conversation with, not just about your brand identity, but also figuring out who are the people that you're trying to bring into your world? What do they need to hear from you? How do you sort of connect the dots and put two and two together? And what's your strategy to put your brand in front of those people in an effective way? Then the Brandstorm is the right fit for you. And after 90 minutes of having a conversation together, you're going to walk away with a recording of our Zoom session and your very own brand playbook, like the thing that we talked about today, where we have all of the things we talked about documented so that you can take it and then either apply it on your own Or if you need some extra hands-on help, like if you're like, Rachel, help, I'm not a designer, can you just do this for me? There's the option for that too. So for you guys, I know that I really enjoyed talking to you and I want to be able to offer the support that you need it. I normally offer this for $4.99 Canadian dollars, but in the case that you guys are like, I really want help, just within this week, if you send me a message, I'm happy to do this for you guys for $2.97 Canadian dollars. And yeah, like it's just a really good way to get that one-on-one support, to get out of your own head and find the clarity that you need to get things set up for your brand. So I'll actually, what I'll do is I'll drop my calendar link here. If any of you are interested in just seeing if this is the right fit for you, book a call with me. We can have a conversation just to see if this is exactly what you need right now. And we could take that from there. So I'll share my link here. You guys can copy that and save it for your own records. That being said, if you guys have any other questions, you can feel free to reach me online. I'll put my contact information on the screen here, my email, my website, and you can find me on all of the social platforms, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. Just shoot me a message and I'm happy to answer any of your questions. And I think that's everything. Did I miss anything?
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I hope, well, not I hope, I know that you have clarified anything that I created as a question and was not able to answer. So thank you for that. I can't wait to see what everyone ultimately comes, so like, you know, hones down on, because we get to do your websites together. So that's going to be a whole lot of fun. Sometime in the next 3 months. So yeah, Rachel, thank you. I learned so much. I have 2 pages of notes, and I'm going to be talking to Rachel at 4 o'clock today, because I was like, I can't figure out author ever after in the branding. So I'll let you know how fabulous it was. Yeah, everybody, thanks for showing up live and asking your questions and playing along. You know, I love you all. And yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. My pleasure. Thank you so much for sticking with me. I know that we went a little bit over, but I hope that a lot of things that we talked about was helpful, just got your brain juices flowing. I know that branding is not something that you figure out overnight, so be gentle on yourselves. Don't be afraid to make a mess and throw spaghetti against the wall. And you know where to find me if you have any questions. I'm here to support you.
Thank you.